Now, I would like you to go with me to Exodus. And I propose to you that I am not indulgent in the Old Testament as a preacher. I never ever saw the Old Testament as my calling. I found out that Hebrew is descriptive and Greek is definitive. And I have spent more of my time in defining Greek thoughts than I have in the description of the Old Testament. And because we spend so much time in the arena of Christianity as it relates to the grace of God and the projection of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, into the world for the redemption of mankind, that was my biggest focus. And suddenly, some questions arise, primarily because of the inability of experience and expectation to clash based on theological expostulation that didn't always bring psychological significance. Because in every theology there is psychology. If that were not so, then he could not require that we be transformed by the renewing of the mind. Which means whatever you expostulate from the platform is going to leave a residual psychological effect. So you're going to put something in my mind based on your concept of God that's either going to give me greater strength or cripple me. Because in every theology, there is psychology. It becomes critical then when the grace preacher who understands determinism or predestination, when he's forced now to deal with human involvement in the things of God. And the line has to be drawn now between what God is doing and what man is doing in partnership with God. So I took off into the Old Testament, and I decided that if I'm going to study the Old Testament, I would not study the Christians. So I have spent the last 4 months studying the rabbis, trying to understand the Old Testament in light of those scholars and people who have spent more time in it than we have. And maybe I get in trouble because of it, I don't know. I went into Exodus and I saw something peculiar. And in Exodus chapter 32, and I'm actually going to preach from 34, but I have to read 32 because many times, if you're like me, you just don't read through Old Testament stories. And Moses was up with God, and they were working on the commandments, and God was trying to tell Moses how to deal with the people. And then suddenly Moses was gone so long, the people got nervous and they started asking Aaron to do what they wanted him to do. And verse 14, and the Lord repented of the evil which he thought to do unto his people, because Moses prayed him out of it. And Moses turned and went down from the mount, and the 2 tables of the testimony were in his hand. The tables were written on both their sides, on the one side and on the other were they written. Now notice now verse 16, and the tables were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God graven upon the tables. And when Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said unto Moses, there is a noise of war in the camp. And he, Moses, said, it is not the voice of them that shout for mastery, neither is it the voice of them that cry for being overcome, but the noise of them that sing do I hear. And it came to pass, as soon as he came nigh unto the camp, that he saw the calf and the dancing. And Moses' anger waxed hot, and he cast the tables out of his hands and brake them beneath the mount. And he took the calf which they had made and burnt it up in fire, ground it in powder, strawed it upon the water, and made the children of Israel drink. Of course, later Aaron, of course, said to him, don't let your anger wax hot. Thou knowest the people. Anyway, they are set on mischief. Ain't that something? And anyway, he prays and he goes back to the Lord. And the Lord said unto Moses, whoever had sinned against me, him will I blot out of my book. But he went and he cried before the Lord. And by verse 34, they are now made it back up. Chapter 34, rather. Now look at verse 1. And the Lord said unto Moses, hew thee 2 tables of stone like unto the first. You see those rocks over there, Moses? I need you to go over there and cut out 2 like I made. You cut them out, and I will write upon these tables the words that were in the first tables, which thou breakest. And he hewed, verse 4, tables of stone like unto the first. And Moses rose up early in the morning and went up into Mount Sinai as the Lord had commanded him, and took his hand the 2 stones. And God, of course, wrote on them. He was merciful and gracious. All right? Now let's follow just a little bit here. Verse 30, 34. And when Aaron and all the children of Israel saw Moses, behold, the skin of his face shone, and they're afraid to come nigh unto him. 33, till Moses had spoken with them, but put a veil on his face. When Moses went in before the Lord, 34, to speak with him, he took the veil off until he came out. He came out, spake unto the children of Israel that which he was commanded. And the children of Israel saw the face of Moses, that the skin of Moses' face shone. Moses put the veil upon his face again until he went in to speak with him. The year of manifestation. I want you to look at somebody and tell them, it's time to shine. Now be a little bit more emphatic and say, it's your time to shine. Now we need to say to everybody in America, it's our time to shine. I want to approach this very unorthodoxly, noting, well, we can note this, that when Moses came down the first time, there was nothing special about his face. But when he came down the second time, he was shining. Karl Marx had a funny take on religion, and he was astoundingly errant when he spoke about religion, but it speaks of an analytical assessment of what seems to be the problem in our day. And that is, somehow we have removed man's personal contribution and responsibility for his life. In 1844, Karl Marx delivered this verdict on religion, and I quote, he called it the sigh of the oppressed creature, the feeling of a heartless world, the soul of soulless conditions. And he went on to say that religion is literally the opium of the people, unquote. What he believed was that religious faith was what reconciled people to the condition that they were in, that it allowed them to handle their poverty, to handle their disease and death and their station of life. And it allowed them to become subject to tyrannical rulers and people who treated them with impunity. And his position was that faith was an anesthesia. It just made the otherwise unbearable bearable. And things are as they are because that is the will of God. And some people are going to be rich, some people are going to be poor, some are going to be in control, and some are going to control. Most powerful means devised for keeping people in their place and maintaining the status quo. And if you know anything about history, you will attest to the fact that the dominant culture has always used religion to further its own disposition and attitude. I'm going to the mountain. You know, I can hoop anytime. It robbed their lives with ritual, and it dignified their tears into prayer. And his thoughts were it gave social order metaphysical inevitability. And so the world, if it's to be changed, he figures that religion had to go. Can I take it further? A little more tension. The abolition, I quote, he says, of religion as the illusory of happiness of the people is at the same time a demand for their real happiness. The demand to give up the illusions of their condition is a demand to give up a condition that requires illusion. So criticism has been plucked imaginary flowers from the chains so man may throw off the chains and pluck real flowers. So religion is only the illusory sun around which man revolves so long as he does not revolve around himself. Now, unquote. Now, I wish Karl Marx had stayed alive long enough to see how Stalin interpreted his points of view. And he should have searched the Bible, because the Bible is not a place where people just accept things as they are. But the Bible opens up with Mesopotamia being overrun, and opens up with God saying to Pharaoh, I need you to let my people go. I feel it here. As I looked at that in light of where we are, I began to wonder, what is it that is so wrong about the way we approach the things of God? Is it that I'm to sit here in my life and simply wait until the breaks come? Or am I responsible in some manner or other to get up from where I am and make some things happen in my own existence? I say that because we have become so easily illusioned by believing that we can just sit around and believe God with no action of our own. And things just fall into place. And so consequently, when we wake up and discover that nobody's going to make it happen for us, we end up with bitterness and sadness because we felt like, well, I just believe Jesus, rub the Bible like a genie, and ask the genie of the lamp to come out and work for me. Now, can I take it like I feel it? You see, the problem with the world is not God. The problem with the world is man. because we have not lived up to our responsibility. And we have shifted the blame to everybody but ourselves. I want to say to you, African-American folk, Barack Obama ain't going to change nothing for you if you don't change yourself. I feel a preach coming on here. Ooh, I feel it here. I feel it. Let me bring you up to speed. The first 11 chapters of Genesis are not just a mere series of historical narratives as I thought earlier. But if you check, you will find they are a highly structured inquiry into responsibility. It's interesting because it begins with the individuals Adam and Eve. Then it moves to Cain and Abel. It then moves and continues with two stories of society. The first one is the flood, and the second one is the Tower of Babel. Now, the first and the last, that's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and the tower, are boundaries that have to be honored between what is permitted and what is forbidden. The boundary, obviously, in the garden was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which was incidentally standing right beside the tree of life. And what God says is there is a distinction between you and I. And I'm going to express that distinction by telling you what is permitted and what is forbidden. It is now your responsibility, since you have freedom of choice, to either choose to operate within the parameters of my commandment or to do what you want to do on your own. If you do what I want you to do, then you'll be blessed. If you do what you decide to do opposite of what I want you to do, you got to live with the consequences. I'm preaching to myself. Can somebody give me a mirror? Can I take my time here? I don't know. Now Eve struggled with the devil or the serpent for the first 6 verses of chapter 3 of Genesis. She argued back and forth with the serpent as to the significance of what it is she was about to do, and he argued God's position and God's attitudes, and of course she just argued back and forth, and finally she capitulated because she saw that it was something to be desired to make one wise, good for food and pleasant to the eyes. Now, brothers, I ask myself, what was Adam's problem? Because Eve at least argued for 6 verses. Before she capitulated, but she just gave it to her husband, and he did eat. He didn't even argue. Now, Eve, what are we doing, baby? Remember, God said we shouldn't do that. Now, I'm just wondering, if you please, that we can be so caught up. Can I preach like I feel? Come here. I need both of you to help me. I need some help. You see, as long as man followed God, everything was in place. Because by time God made the woman, the man already had everything in place. He had everything because when you follow God, he takes care of your business. And it was man's responsibility to follow God. And it was woman's responsibility to follow man. But when the man took the fruit from the woman, turn around. Now the man is following the woman, and God don't follow nobody. See, when God set the boundaries, he set the boundaries so that we might understand he is God. And isn't it interesting that you have stood beside life? And many times in our decisions, we have chosen the negative over the positive because it just looked better. And anytime you operate with God, you don't simply operate by sensual perception, because a whole lot of packages look good on the outside, but they ain't got nothing to give you on the inside. Freedom to choose. And what God says now is, I have created you and I have made you with the capacity to understand who I am. Which means if I can manifest myself to you, then I know who I have made. We have run from responsibility, unfailing to understand that whenever you are given responsibility, it's respect. Because God respects you enough cognitively and intellectually, and he respects what he has created to reveal himself to the extent that he respects who he creates. You see, I can love you and not respect you because you don't take care of your business. But the more responsibility you can stand up to is the more respect I'll give to you. You see, a whole lot of folk want to be respected when they're not responsible. I wish I had the time. I wish I had the time. You see, God is going to hold us accountable. And the only way to hold anybody accountable is because they are responsible. You can't hold somebody accountable who is not responsible. Notice God calls Abraham. He was going down to Sodom. I should talk about that later. He's going down to Sodom, and he says to Abraham, he says to his angels, I can't keep this from Abraham. And he puts Abraham in a position where Abraham is forced now to pray for the inhabitants of Sodom, even though he knew most of them were ungodly. But he put him in a place where he had to pray. And here's what Abraham says. Abraham says, shall not the God of all the earth do right? In other words, he is now pointing his finger at God and says, you cannot destroy the righteous with the wicked. After all, you are the God of all the earth. And God says, it's okay. It's okay, because I'm going to make Abraham a father of many nations, and I'm going to have him to expostulate my will to his children's children's children, which means I want him to hold me responsible because I'm getting ready to hold him responsible. You cannot tell me that God is flowing through your being and you have to sit around and wait for somebody else to make your life work for you. If you get up and partner with God, you can let the enemy know, I don't have to compromise with anybody to have my life work. God and I will make it work. And if you come up in my life, you are not a necessity, so you better be a benefit. Y'all sit down. We got some work to do. Then we acquire moral responsibility. And that is the knowledge that choice has its limits. Everything we can do, we may not do. And as you get more money, you have to live by that rule. Because everything you feel like doing, you can't do. So even though you have a choice, you've got to discover that choice has its limits. Cain, you are your brother's keeper. And because you can kill him doesn't mean you should kill him. Then later we discovered collective responsibility. And that is, we are not by ourselves. We are a part of a family. We are a part of a community. Which means I am expecting you to hold up your part of the bargain as I hold up mine, and God's standing back and he's watching. Let me just take it further to make it clearer. The first battle that Israel had to fight was against Egypt at the Red Sea. And they were so petrified that they wanted to go back in, and Moses said to them, the enemy you see today, you will never see again. And oh, the church just got happy and fell out, and God just wiped Pharaoh out. They said that God drowned Pharaoh's army, and some smart aleck said that he could not have drowned them in the Red Sea because it was only 6 inches of water. And I said, well, that's really a miracle then, if he could have drowned all them folk in 6 inches of water. Now you would think that we would have easy sailing. The Lord is fighting our battles. The next battle, when they came to Rephidim and the Amalekites attacked them, now God said, I'm not just going to let you be bystanders, because you have an intellect, you have capacity, you have ability. I gave it to you. And I'm going to ask Moses to raise his hands. Now, as long as his hands are up, you're going to have the victory. And God knew he couldn't keep his hands up that long, and so his hands fell. And when his hands fell, they began to lose. But God respected their intellect enough to know that they could sit Moses down, get him some community help from and Aaron, and hold his hands up. In other words, I'm gonna fight your battle coming out, but I ain't fighting all of your battles by myself. I'm not going to sit around here and make your life work simply for you, but I'm going to make it work through you. We are going to partner to defeat the enemy. And if you think you're going to sit around, hardly pray, hardly fast, hardly think, hardly work things out, want to sit at home and me drop you off an envelope of blessing, the devil is a liar. You're going to get up, shake yourself, empower yourself with the mind I gave you, and tell the devil it's my time to shine. Oh, I feel something pushing me here. I feel it here. Have I told you, touch your neighbor yet? It's coming. We find out in the society that itself then is subject to a higher power. And that now is what we call ontological responsibility. And that is, there are moral limits to power. You can't build a tower into heaven because God has divided. He's saying you ain't getting to heaven without me. You see, man would go if he could, but God said you got to come through me to get there. I want to take you now to Abraham as I move to Moses. The first words of God to Moses, to Abraham, is leave your land. I want you to leave the place of your birth, leave your father's house. Now this is your personal responsibility. I want you to leave some things that you think are so important to your destiny. One writer puts it like this, and I quote, Abraham is commanded to relinquish everything that leads human beings to see their acts as not their own, unquote. Now, who else but a higher power can say to me, I don't care how you came in this world, I'm going to hold you responsible for how you come out? Because so often we want to blame everybody and everything for the condition we find ourselves in. And as the world begins to move even faster and at a more rapid pace, because the outside of the world is changing quicker than we're changing on the inside. And anytime you allow man to have more destructive weapons on the outside than he has culture and character on the inside, you are heading for great destruction. If you're going to be wicked and mean on the inside, we don't need your brain to discover nuclear weapons. We would rather have you with bow and arrows so you can't kill as many folk with your mean heart and your smart head as you can with nuclear weapons. I hope somebody's with me. You think that your father is the reason you're that way, and your mama is the reason you're that way. But here's what I want you to do, Abraham. I want you to leave your land. Now here's what Karl Marx said. Karl Marx held that behavior is determined by structures in society, among which land ownership is the principle. And here's what God said: leave your land. Whatever you think is forming you into who you are, Abraham, I want you to leave your land. Now, Spinoza believed that human conduct is given by instincts we acquire at birth. Now, that's genetic determinism. My mama's mama was this way, and my daddy's daddy was this way, and it's come down through many generations. So I really can't help my temper, and nobody in my family ever became anything. And I remember where I grew up. I grew up in the worst part of town. Power of the Holy Ghost can reverse. And I don't care who in your family hasn't become anything. It's your time to shine. It's your time to tell the enemy, if everybody in my family were drunkards, I'm going to be sober enough to do the will of God. And in 2009, this generation curse is getting ready to reverse, because I know what I can be through the power of God. I feel something pushing me now. The lecture's almost over. Freud held that we are shaped by early experiences in our childhood. Thus the command, leave your father's house. Because none of us can deny that we have been influenced by birth. We have been influenced by genetic proclivity. We have been influenced by certain experiences we have had in our youth. But if you sit here and maintain the negatives that you have come through to this day, you will sit around resources and never take the advantage of where you are, because you're sitting around being sorry for yourself and blaming everybody else. The fact is, you didn't have a father. Now what you gonna do about it? It's either you gonna sit around and look back over the fact he wasn't there for you and be bitter the rest of your life, or you gonna shake it through the power of the Holy Ghost and say, the fact that I didn't have a father is gonna make my testimony even greater. That in spite of not having the advantage, I still rose like a phoenix out of the ashes, and can't nobody deny that God and I got the job done. I feel something pushing me now. When I look then at Abraham's journey, as I look at Israel's journey, what I see is not just a geographic change of position, but what I see is a psychological change of disposition. Because
Because when Israel is coming from Egypt and they're on their way to Canaan, it is a 3-day journey, and they couldn't get there because God couldn't penetrate the mind. If there is to be a manifestation, there has to be a transformation of the way you think in the middle of all the benefits and blessings that God has placed around you. Can I preach like I feel it? The money has not left the planet. The money has not gone to another planet. It's not in Jupiter. It's still on Earth. It just shifted from some people's pockets to other people's pockets. While we were sitting here blaming our birth and blaming our mamas and blaming our brothers and sisters, somebody just put their hand in our pockets and put it in their pocket. How you gonna get from slavery to ownership if you still keep your same mentality? I can get you there in 3 days, but your mindset have kept you in a wilderness for 40 years. But I just rose to tell you, it's your time to shine. If you can just get your mind out of the negative and put it in the positive, can't no devil in hell stop you from becoming what God would have you to be. I feel the Holy Ghost in here. I'm working tonight, but I feel the God of my salvation. When I look at Abraham, then he shows me, and I'm gonna hoop in a minute, y'all sit down. Abraham exercises moral responsibility when he enters into battle to protect Lot. And he shows us, I am my brother's keeper. One of our great problems is, as a group, we kill each other more than anybody else. And I rose to say it's time for the church to raise its voice and say to our African American males, find something else to kill. Go to the range and shoot the dummies. But it's time out for us to kill one another, because we are our brother's keeper. You got to have my back, and I got to have your back, because ain't nobody gonna have your back if you don't have it. You got to stand up for your brother instead of trying to climb up on top of his head. I feel that we might as well have church in here. Abraham scales the collective responsibility when he prays for the inhabitants of Lot. He ascends the height of ontological responsibility when, in spite of how he feels, he binds his son Isaac, recognizing the primacy of the divine word, and he's about to kill his son. But God sent a ram in the bush. Can I preach like I feel it? What Abraham showed us is, you don't have to fail like the other generations, because once you take your responsibility and quit blaming folk, Adam blamed Eve and implicated God. The woman you gave me, if you didn't give me this woman, I wouldn't have ate that fruit. The devil is a liar. She blamed the serpent, but God came through and judged all of them. Somebody in this country has put us in the condition we're in, and it sure ain't God, because it's the love of money that's the root of all evil. And America has spent its time only dealing with its interests. Why don't just run to Somalia and try to keep folk alive in Darfur? They ain't got no oil, but we run into Iraq to keep folk alive because they got our interests. But when are we going to be interested in one another, Christian America? I feel like preaching here. I'm gonna preach till the devil gets mad. Adam and Eve said, it's not our fault. Cain says, I don't see why I can't do what I want. Noah says, I'm responsible for my family. Bible says we're answerable to no one but ourselves. So without responsibility, Adam loses paradise. Cain is forced to wander. Noah declines in drunkenness. Babel is left unbuilt. If you are not responsible, you're going to lose blessings. Opportunities are going to be ignored. Stupor is going to be induced. And we're going to start a lot of stuff that we don't finish because you are responsible for you. Shake somebody's hand like you're going to shake it off and say, if you can't make yourself happy, why do you expect me to make you happy? If you can't pick yourself up, I feel like preaching. I feel like lifting him up. And so 40 days after the greatest epiphany in the history of the world, and that's the revelation of God at Sinai, the prophet has been wrestling with God and the people because of the episode of the golden calf. He goes up to receive instructions and he does not come down. And when the leader didn't come down, the folk tried to make a leader themselves. But you better understand this. You cannot substitute what God has put in your life. That's why a lot of folk try to duck from the leadership that God has placed over them, because the leader has put a challenge on your spirit. But you can't get away and substitute something you made for what God requires of you. Can I preach like I feel it? Touch your neighbor, say, if God requires it, that's who you got to follow. Don't get so big-headed because you have made a few dollars to think you can abort what God has planned for your life. Moses now is on the way down and he hears the sound of dancing. And Joshua said it must be a battle. Moses says no, it's not. These people are going crazy down here. And he takes the tablets of stone that God made himself and he shatters it on the ground. The Jewish tradition is this is Yom Kippur, when he descends from the mountain and he shatters the two stones. I feel something pushing me now. Now Moses, if you had participated in building this, you would not have torn it apart so fast. Can I preach like I feel it? You see, the problem with the church is we expect God to do it all, and we just sit down here and do nothing. And we feel like if we give him a little verbal praise that we have done what we are supposed to do. And if I lift up my hands and worship him, I have done what I'm supposed to do. The devil is a lie. Can I tell you what real praise is? It's when you are walking with him in you and move with the radiance of somebody that's got real power. Come on, Pat, let's have some church. When you can walk out and understand that this ain't just about God, but this is God in me, and I represent God in my home, and I represent God in my society. That's where we have gone wrong. We just sit back and wait until the government does it. The devil is a liar. You have the power of God in your spirit, and your mind ain't no less than anybody's mind that's outside the church. And I'm sick and tired of church people wanting me to pack my mind up and leave it in the cloakroom. That's why you can tell me anything. The devil is a liar. How am I going to be the next Bill Gates? By simply sitting down at home with a Bible in my hand. The devil is a liar. I got to put the Bible down, bring my mind into play and let the world know, because I speak in tongues, that don't make me a dummy. I feel like preaching in here. I feel like lifting him up. Can I preach like I feel it? If you participate with God, it'll last longer. The first commandments were broken instantly. The second commandments are still around, because when Moses got involved, he put the human factor with the heavenly factor. Some of us want the church to be built on prayer, but you got to reach in your pocket and put your money on the table. That same money you used to spend in the club, that same money you used to chase the women with, that same money, all of a sudden you come to church and all of a sudden you got tight. Let the Lord handle it. The devil is a liar. He's gonna handle it through you. I feel like preaching now. I give somebody a high five. Say, it's my time to shine. It's my time to move to the next level. It's my time to rise. It's my time to let the world know I'm not just a person, but I'm a person filled with the power of the Spirit of God. Can I preach like I feel it? The Jews have a statement, Erata Deleia, an awakening from above, and another statement, Erata Deletata, and that's an awakening from below. The first is initiated by God. The second is initiated by man. Whenever God gives a miracle, a man receives it, praise him for a minute, and then walk away like he had never done it. I feel like preaching in here. How many times has God brought you out, and the very next time you got nervous like he wasn't going to deliver you? That's because you had nothing to do with it. He brought them through Pharaoh, and the first difficulty they got, they wanted to go back to Egypt. The devil is a lie. Whenever your sweat, blood, and tears go into helping God work something out, you ain't gonna walk away from it. Can I feel like preaching? I might as well preach. Every woman in here, give your sister a high five and say, sister, a man don't stay with you because of what you give him. I might as well preach it. Excuse me, brothers. You can give him a car. You can give him pocket money. You can give him a house and buy everything he wants. And while you're buying it, you ain't got no respect for him. You'll give it to him because you love him, but you won't respect him. And before you know it, he'll lip out of the house and get him a little woman with 5 babies, and you ain't got none, and you're beginning to wonder, how could he have left you when you were so good to him? But can I tell you a secret? Let him buy your car, let him buy your house, let him drive your car, and let him fix your life up. And when things seem to be going wrong, he ain't gonna be in no hurry to leave no house he paid his money for, to leave no car he paid his money for. He ain't trying to leave because he had to pay for it. Shake somebody's hand, say, partner, it's time to shine. When you pray and walk with God, when you pray and hold God's hand and come down from the mountain and let the devil know it wasn't God alone, but I did my part. I got up in the morning victory, because it's my time. Ain't nothing wrong with my mind. Shake somebody's hand. Say, I ain't a dummy. I can get it done. I can have victory. This is my year. I feel the Holy Ghost. Y'all excuse me, but God respects me because he gave me the mind, and you can't let other folk talk you out of your mind. Your mind is God-given. Your mind is intellectual. Your mind can think things through. You are articulate. You got personality. You got character. And God said, I want to use you to break down the stronghold of poverty. I want to use you to manifest that weeping may endure for a night, but joy is coming in the morning. I want you to know that no weapon. I feel like somebody holler, shine. Tell your neighbor, shine. Shine to a new house. Shine on your new job. Shine in this house. Shine in your family. Shine. 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 God is in you. Shine. Power. Shine. Spirit of God. Shine. Holiness. Shine. Victory is mine. I'm gonna shine. Hit somebody. Say shine. It's in you. 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 Shine. Preacher, shine choir, shine fathers, shine mothers. It's our time to shine. A city that set on